Did you even ask the owner of this house for permission? The question left my lips with a calm I hadn't known I possessed. I had just pushed open the door to my condo, my arms still aching from the weight of dangling grocery bags, and there she was, Chloe, my daughter-in-law, standing boldly in the very center of my living room, as if it were the most natural place in the world. Two enormous, expensive-looking suitcases rested at her feet like obedient pets. Her expression was a mixture of surprise and something far worse, a flicker of pure annoyance. As if I were the intruder, as if my arrival had disrupted some meticulously laid plan. She glanced up at me, blinked twice slowly, and then released that uncomfortable, clipped laugh she always deployed when confronted. It was a short, sharp sound designed to make the other person feel ridiculous. But I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. I remained planted on the threshold of my own home, the heavy bags digging red grooves into my forearms, waiting for an answer she clearly had not prepared. "Hey, Ava, I didn't hear you come in." Her voice was light, almost musical, as if we were discussing the afternoon weather, as if the suitcases were invisible, as if it were utterly commonplace for her to be standing in the heart of my sanctuary on a random Thursday without a word of warning, without a flicker of consideration that this space was my refuge, the one place in the entire world where I could still breathe freely without demands. I didn't move. I stood there in the doorway, feeling the burn in my muscles, but I didn't set the bags down. Something inside me had crystallized the moment my eyes had registered those twin pieces of luggage, something that had been soft and pliable for decades, always ready to yield, to accommodate, had suddenly hardened into an unyielding line. "I asked you a question, Chloe." My voice was firmer this time, leaving no room for her performative levity. She tucked a perfectly styled strand of honey blonde hair behind her ear, a gesture she used to buy time. Her eyes, artfully shadowed to match her designer blouse, darted away from mine for a fraction of a second before returning with that small, condescending smile I had come to despise. "Ava, please, don't be dramatic. Dion and I only need to crash for a few days. They've started demolition at our place, and the noise is unbearable. The crew starts at 6 a.m. and doesn't leave until 7 at night. We can't sleep, we can't work. We figured it wouldn't be a problem to come here. You live alone, and you have 2 whole bedrooms just sitting empty." There it was, the sentence that perfectly encapsulated my family's view of my existence. You live alone, and you have rooms you don't use. As if my life were an empty vessel, waiting to be filled by the needs of others. As if the fact that no one slept in the adjacent rooms automatically transformed my home into a public utility, a convenience to be tapped at will. As if my 68 years on this earth had not earned me the fundamental right to decide how, when, and with whom I shared my space. I finally stepped fully inside, letting the door swing shut with a soft click that sounded deafening in the quiet. I walked to the dining table and set the bags down. The canned goods thudded against the wood with more force than I'd intended. Chloe took a minuscule step backward. I noticed it the first crack in her facade of relaxed entitlement. Her body language shifted from invasive comfort to guarded awareness. I stood beside the table, not unpacking, not moving toward the kitchen as I normally would. My palms rested flat on the cool wooden surface, and I could feel my own pulse throbbing in my fingertips. It wasn't fear. It wasn't anxiety. It was the electric hum of reaching a point of no return. "Does Dion know you're here?" The question was rhetorical. I already knew the answer, but I needed to hear her say it. I needed the confirmation of what I already sensed in my bones, that my son had sanctioned this, that he had been a co-architect of this plan from the beginning, that together they had decided my consent was an unnecessary formality. Chloe let out a long, dramatic sigh, as if I were a recalcitrant child. "Of course he knows, Ava. It was practically his idea. He just finishing up at the office, and he'll be over later with the rest of our things. I thought he would have called you. He didn't call. No, he had not called. And that silence, that absence of a simple, respectful telephone call, spoke volumes. My son, Dion, the child I had raised alone after his father vanished from our lives when he was only 7. The boy I had fed with the meager earnings from double shifts cleaning offices by night and serving bitter coffee by day. The same child who had hugged me when he was small and whispered that when he grew up, he would take care of me forever. That very man now considered it perfectly acceptable to move his life into my home without consultation, treating me as an extension of his convenience, a resource to be managed. I walked toward the suitcases. They were sleek, modern, branded, the kind Chloe flaunted in carefully curated social media posts. They looked new, probably purchased during one of their frequent weekend getaways, while my own suitcase, bought 15 years ago at a liquidation sale, sat worn but serviceable in my closet. And you simply assumed this was acceptable? I asked, my voice low. Arriving at my home with your belongings without asking if I was amenable, without considering for even a moment that I might have plans, that I might cherish my privacy, that I might not want to share this space with anyone. Chloe crossed her arms over her chest. Her posture solidified into defensiveness. Ava, you're Dion's mother. We're family. I don't understand why you're making this so complicated. It's only for a few days, maybe a week. It's not like we're asking for the impossible. Besides, she added, her tone shifting to one of false concern, I thought you'd be happy for the company. You're always saying this place feels so empty. Empty. The word echoed in the quiet room like a funeral knell. Yes, in a moment of vulnerability, I had once mentioned to Dion that the condo felt silent after my sister Olivia moved in with her daughter last year. But there was a cosmic difference between silent and empty. My home was silent because I chose that silence. After decades of noise, of demands, of being perpetually available to everyone except myself, I had finally cultivated a hard-won peace in the stillness. But Chloe had taken that confession and twisted it into a justification, as if admitting to a moment of loneliness was an open invitation, a plea for someone to come fill every corner without asking. Listen to me very carefully, I said, my voice low but resonant. Chloe stilled. Something in my tone finally commanded her full attention. This house can feel however I need it to feel. It can be silent or it can be full of music. It can be empty or it can feel complete. But what it will never, ever be is available on demand to anyone who decides they have a use for it, without my permission. I am the owner here, Chloe. Not a convenient backup option when the two of you encounter a problem. She opened her mouth to retort, but at that moment we heard the definitive sound of a key in the lock. The door opened, and Dion, my son, walked in, carrying 2 more duffel bags and wearing the easy, confident smile of someone who believes everything is under control. Mom, hey, glad you're home. Chloe explained everything, right? We'll just be here a week, 2 tops. You won't even know we're around. His words floated into the space as if they were the most reasonable declaration in the world. He dropped the bags next to the suitcases, dusted his hands on his trousers, and looked at me with an expression I knew all too well. It was the same look he'd had at 12, coming home late from playing basketball, expecting me not to be angry because he was, after all, just being a kid. Except Dion wasn't 12. He was 42, and I was no longer that young, exhausted mother who surrendered to every charming smile because I was too drained to fight another battle. I stood by the dining table, my hand still pressed to the wood, watching him enter my home as if it were his birthright, as if the last 40 years had not happened. as if my continuing role as his mother meant I had automatically forfeited any expectation of basic respect. Dion stepped forward and leaned in to kiss my cheek. I didn't move toward him. I didn't pull away, but I remained perfectly still, and he halted halfway, a flicker of confusion crossing his face before it was replaced by a wider, more strained smile. "What's wrong, Mom? You have a rough day." A rough day. As if my reaction could be attributed to a bad mood. A long line at the bank, heavy traffic, not to the fact that my son and daughter-in-law had decided to relocate into my personal space without a conversation. Not to the fact that they were treating my feelings as irrelevant. Not to the fact that they assumed my life, my peace, were commodities available for their consumption. I didn't have a rough day, Dion. I came home to find your wife had moved in without anyone bothering to ask if I agreed. Dion chuckled, a genuine sound of amusement, as if I'd told a mildly funny joke. He ran a hand through his hair, that gesture of his when he thinks someone is overreacting gone. Shook his head. "Mom, come on, don't be dramatic. I tried calling you twice this morning. You didn't pick up. I figured you were out running errands, and we could get settled before you got back. It's really not a big deal." I looked at Chloe. She was now standing beside the suitcases, arms still crossed, watching our exchange with a mixture of discomfort and a glint of something perilously close to satisfaction, as if my confrontation with Dion was proving a point she had long suspected, that I was difficult, unreasonable, an obstacle in a situation that should be simple. "You called twice," I said, turning back to Dion. "And when I didn't answer, you decided that constituted sufficient authorization to move into my house." "We're not moving in, Mom. We're staying for a few days." Dion walked past me into the kitchen, opened the refrigerator with casual familiarity, pulled out a bottle of water I had bought that very afternoon, and took a long swig directly from it. "What do you want us to do now? Go hunt for a hotel at 6 p.m. on a Thursday when I have back-to-back meetings starting at 7 a.m. tomorrow?" There it was, guilt, framed not as an emotion, but as a series of practical inconveniences I would be inflicting if I held my ground. As if their lack of planning now constituted an obligation for me. As if their presumption had created a fait accompli I was now too rude to disrupt. I looked down the hallway. The guest room door was slightly ajar. From where I stood, I could see a corner of the bed, already strewn with clothing. She hadn't been asking permission to stay. She had been claiming territory. I walked toward that room. I heard Diana's footsteps behind me, and the low murmur of Chloe's voice saying something I couldn't catch. I pushed the door fully open. The scene was one of established occupation. Clothes were not just on the bed. They were arranged as if in a boutique display. Toiletries were lined up with military precision on the dresser. Chloe's leather travel case lay open by the mirror. 2 pairs of expensive shoes stood side by side near the wall. A laptop glowed, plugged into the outlet by the nightstand. This wasn't the temporary unpacking of a short stay. This was the installation of someone settling in for the long haul. I turned to face Dion, who had stopped in the doorway, hands in his pockets, watching me warily. "A week, you said." He nodded, though his eyes skittered away for a moment. "2 at the absolute most, Mom. I told you. And all of this," I gestured at the room, "is for the laptop, the parade of products, enough clothing for a month-long cruise." Dion shrugged that infuriatingly casual motion. He used to minimize things he knew were significant. "Chloe has to work remotely, and obviously we brought what we needed to be comfortable. We weren't going to live out of a bag for 2 weeks. Comfortable." The word hung in the air. They needed to be comfortable in my space, using my resources, and I, apparently, simply needed to be understanding. I left the room and returned to the living room. Chloe had migrated to my favorite armchair, the one by the window that I had saved 4 months to buy 3 years ago. She was scrolling through her phone with the focused detachment of someone without a care. When she saw me, she looked up and offered another tight smile. "Ava, we really will be zero trouble. You won't even know we're here. I work from home, so I'll be tucked away in the room most of the day. Dion is gone before dawn and back late. We can buy our own groceries, or we can all cook together, whatever you prefer. Whatever I prefer." As if she were offering me a menu of choices within a framework I had already accepted. As if she were granting me agency within my own invasion. I walked to the armchair. I didn't speak. I simply stood there, looking at her until the smile melted from her face. After a few uncomfortable seconds, she stood up abruptly. "I'm sorry. Did you want to sit here?" I didn't want to sit there. I wanted her to understand that every molecule of this condo belonged to me. That this chair was not common seating, but the site of my morning coffees, my afternoon reading, my private tears after Serena's funeral, my hard-won decisions. Dion re-entered the living room, and the tension was now a palpable, suffocating presence. We stood in an awkward triangle, a silent standoff. Finally, Chloe broke the silence, her voice now stripped of its false ease. "Ava, if you're truly that opposed to us staying, we can figure something else out. We don't want to make you uncomfortable in your own place." I looked at Dion, waiting for him to echo this, to offer a retreat, but he was looking at the floor, jaw clenched, visibly annoyed at the turn of events. And in that moment, a cold clarity washed over me. My son would not defend me. He would not admit fault. He would not validate my feelings, because to him, I was still that mother whose love was measured in silent sacrifice. Any deviation from that script was not self-respect. It was a personal failing. I sank into the armchair by the window. My body felt heavy, burdened by a fatigue deeper than any physical tiredness. It was the exhaustion of a lifetime of carrying other people's emotional weight without ever having my own lifted. "I want you both to answer something honestly," I said, my voice quiet but clear. Dion's gaze snapped to me. "If our situations were reversed, if I showed up at your condo with my suitcases, unannounced, saying I needed to stay for 2 weeks because of a problem with my building, would you welcome me without a second thought?" The glance they exchanged was instantaneous and telling. They both knew the answer, and they both knew it differed from what they expected of me. Chloe cleared her throat. "Well, we'd have to think about it. Our place is smaller, and we both work from home now. It would be complicated." That small, insignificant act felt like a physical blow. It confirmed everything. He saw no boundary between his space and mine. My refrigerator, my food, my sanctuary. It was all part of a shared domain where his access was unlimited. I closed my eyes for a beat, wrestling with the pressure building behind my ribs. It wasn't anger yet. It was something older, more profound. The accumulated weight of a lifetime of yielding. The weariness of decades spent being useful, available, convenient for everyone but myself. "How many days exactly is a few days, Dion?" He shrugged, still drinking the water, not meeting my eyes. "A week. Maybe 2. The contractor swears they'll be quick. We just need somewhere we can sleep without being woken by a jackhammer at dawn." 2 weeks. 2 weeks. 14 days of having 2 other people in my space, using my bathroom, occupying my kitchen, disrupting the fragile ecosystem of my solitude. 14 days of forfeiting the ability to wander through my own living room in pajamas if I woke thirsty at night. 14 days of negotiating schedules, of muffling my music, of setting aside my routines. 14 days of surrendering the peace I had fought so hard to claim after a lifetime of noise and obligation. And it simply never occurred to you that I might not be okay with that. Dion finally recapped the bottle and looked at me with an expression that masqueraded as patience but was, in truth, thinly veiled condescension. Mom, you're my mother. Of course, I assumed you'd be okay with it. What did you want us to do? Shell out $150 a night for some hotel when you've got 2 perfectly good bedrooms sitting here? That's just throwing money away. $150 a night. There it was. The naked truth. Stripped of all pretense about family bonding or concern for my loneliness. It was about money, about financial convenience, about how using my apartment for free was more sensible than paying for their own comfort. And I, as always, was expected to understand, to be reasonable, to prioritize their fiscal logic over my emotional well-being. Chloe cleared her throat when she spoke. Her voice had adopted that soft, conciliatory tone people use when they want to sound reasonable, while manipulating the situation to their advantage. Ava, we truly don't want to be a burden. If it's about expenses, we can chip in. Maybe an extra $50 for utilities? We'll be using water and power. It's only fair. $50, as if the issue could be quantified and resolved with cash. As if I could attach a price tag to my privacy, to my morning ritual of coffee on the balcony, to the profound relief of existing without having to perform the roles of mother, mother-in-law, or hostess. It's not about the money, Chloe. My voice came out wearier than I intended. Dion approached again, this time placing a hand on my shoulder with the practiced ease of someone who believes a tactile gesture can soften any resistance. Then what is it about, Mom? Just tell us what you need. You want us to buy all the groceries? Done. You want us to deep clean before we leave? You want quiet hours? We'll be like church mice. Just tell us the rules. What I needed was for them to have asked first. What I needed was for them to have considered that I possessed the right to say no. What I needed was for them to understand that being family did not grant them a skeleton key to every aspect of my existence. But how could I articulate that without being cast as the selfish mother, the difficult mother-in-law, the ungrateful woman who refuses to help her own flesh and blood? I gently but firmly removed his hand from my shoulder. What I need, Dion, is for you to understand that this is my home, not a hotel, not a contingency plan, not a resource to be tapped whenever you have an inconvenience. It is the place where I live, where I have the absolute right to decide who enters and who stays. But we're family, Mom. His reply was instantaneous, as if those 3 words were an incontrovertible argument that nullified all other considerations. And perhaps, for the longest time, I had believed that too. Perhaps for years, I had accepted that being family meant perpetual availability, bottomless understanding, a willingness to sacrifice my own needs on the altar of theirs. But something within me had shifted. Perhaps it was turning 68 and viscerally understanding that time is not infinite. Perhaps it was the death of my dear friend Serena last year, who spent her final days grieving a life lived for others. Perhaps it was simply the accumulated exhaustion of becoming a ghost in my own story. Precisely because you are my family, I said, my voice trembling slightly. It hurts more. I would expect from you, more than from anyone, an understanding that I too have a right to my space, to my peace, to my own decisions. Dion exchanged a glance with Chloe, that shared look of mutual frustration when dealing with a problem. In that instant, I was the problem. Dion let out a long, exasperated sigh, the kind reserved for conversations going in pointless circles. He dragged both hands down his face, a gesture of barely contained irritation, then fixed me with that perfected expression the patient son, dealing with an irrational parent. Okay, Mom, I get that you're upset we didn't give more notice. You're right about that. But we're already here. The bags are inside. Chloe's already unpacked a few things in the guest room. Exactly, I said. It would be complicated. You would consider your needs, your space, your work, and you would be entirely within your rights to do so. No one would accuse you of failing family duty. But because I am your mother, my complications are supposed to be invisible. My needs are supposed to be non-existent. But you're my mother, Dion said, as if repeating the word would make its magic work. It's different. Why is it different? Does it mean my boundaries are negotiable? I'm not saying that. With every assumption, with every decision made without consulting me, with every time you dismiss how I feel, because it doesn't align with what you need from me, I stood and walked to the suitcases by the door. They were symbols, concrete manifestations of a lifetime of unspoken agreements. I had taught him this. For years, I had shown him that my space was his space, my time was his time, my life was a shared resource. I had been his most diligent instructor in this flawed lesson. Dion came over and placed his hand on my shoulder again, softer this time. Mom, please, we just need a place to sleep. But they were taking my autonomy. They were taking my right to say no without punishment. They were taking my ability to exist as something more than an accessory to their lives. I moved away from his touch. This is my home, Dion. I pay the mortgage. I decide who comes through this door. And right now, I am deciding that I need you both to leave. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator. Dion stood frozen, his hands still suspended in the air. Chloe made a small, choked sound. What did you say? Diane's voice was strangely high. I need you to take your things and go. He stared at me as if I were speaking a foreign language. Tell me you're joking. Chloe stepped forward, her hands raised in a placating gesture that couldn't mask her panic. Ava, wait. You don't have to do this. That word again. A get-out of jail free card that supposedly nullified all need for basic courtesy. Precisely because you are family, I said. Each word deliberate. It wounds me that I must explain that I too deserve to be treated with dignity. Dion laughed then, a sharp, bitter burst of disbelief. He turned, paced to the window, then wheeled back. This is insane. You're throwing your own son out? Because we showed up a few hours before we could call. Asking before occupying someone's home isn't a protocol, Dion. It's fundamental respect. It's what you would expect from anyone else. He shook his head, hands on his hips, looking at me as if I were a stranger. I can't believe you're doing this after everything we've done for you. The statement hung between us, ugly and vague. What exactly have you done for me, Dion? He opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked to Chloe, but she was studying the floor. We bought you that new television last Christmas when yours died. I offered to pay you back. You refused, called it a gift, then mentioned it at every family gathering for 6 months as evidence of your generosity. We drove you to the ER when you twisted your ankle. You dropped me at the curb. I sat alone for 3 hours before a nurse helped me call a cab to get home. We include you in dinners. You include me when you need an extra person to split the bill or to perform the role of doting son for your friends. At those dinners, you talk over me. You make plans that exclude me. You look at your phones. I am Sadresin, Dion, not a participant. He took a step closer, and his anger was now a living thing in the room. You know what your problem is, Mom? You always find a way to play the martyr. I am not playing at anything. I am drawing a line. No. What you're redoing is punishing me because your life didn't turn out the way you dreamed. Because Dad left, because you had to struggle. And now that I'm stable, now that I dare to ask you for one damn favor, you pick this moment to collect on 40 years of resentment. His words were designed to hurt, to undermine, to reframe my boundary as a petty act of vengeance. And the cruelest part was the grain of truth, yes. There was loneliness. Yes, there were regrets. But that did not invalidate my right to my own life. You're right about one thing, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor inside. My life didn't turn out as I hoped. The part that disappoints me most is that I raised a son who sees me as a utility, not a person. That I spent so long being useful, I forgot how to be valued. Chloe interjected, her voice trembling. Ava, please. We made a mistake not calling first, but kicking out your own son. It's a cruel overreaction. Cruel. The word landed like a stone. Was it cruel for you to assume you could take it without asking? The cruelty seems to flow only one way here. Dion strode to the suitcases, hefting one with unnecessary force. You know what? Fine. We're leaving. I don't need to be where I'm clearly not wanted. He looked at me, pain and fury warring in his eyes. I hope you enjoy your empty, quiet house. Mom, I hope it's worth it. My son is not lost because I set a boundary. Dion, if you choose to leave and not look back, that is your decision. He was at the door, suitcase in hand, when he stopped. He was at the door, suitcase in hand, when he stopped. He turned, and a nasty, sarcastic laugh escaped him. This is perfect. Just perfect. Wait until I tell everyone. Wait until Aunt Olivia hears how the ever-generous Ava threw her son out on the street for daring to ask for help. Let's see how your boundaries hold up when the whole family knows what you've done. The threat was clear. Conform or be branded a monster. For a heartbeat, the old weight of guilt and fear pressed down the instinct to relent, to apologize, to keep the peace at any cost. Then I remembered Serena in her hospital bed, her frail hand clutching mine. The biggest mistake I made, she'd whispered, was caring more about what people thought of me than what I thought of myself. I looked my son in the eye. Go ahead, Dion. Tell them whatever story lets you sleep at night. We both know the truth. He stared at me for a long moment, then wrenched the door open and stepped into the hall. Chloe hurried after him with the second suitcase, shooting me a last, bewildered look. I don't understand you, Ava. The kind of mother who has finally learned that loving herself isn't selfishness. I said quietly, it's survival. The elevator arrived with a chime. Dion entered without looking back. Chloe followed. The door slid shut, and they were gone. I closed my own door and leaned against it. The silence that rushed in was different, heavy with consequence, charged with the echo of a bridge burning. I walked to the guest room methodically. Without malice, I folded Chloe's clothes. I placed her toiletries in a neat bag. I unplugged the laptop. I was reclaiming my territory, not with rage, but with a solemn, sad determination. Later, I sat in my chair by the window as night fell. My phone buzzed. Text from Dion. Hope you're happy. I wasn't happy, but I was clear. For the first time in decades, I had chosen my own dignity. The weeks that followed were a slow adjustment to a new reality. The guilt, a familiar tenant, slowly began to evacuate. In its place grew a fragile seedling of peace. My sister, Olivia, called. Concerned, swayed by Dion's narrative. But when I explained, she listened. And to my shock, she apologized for the year she'd lived with me, for never asking, for assuming. A month after the suitcase standoff, Dion called. Not to fight, but to talk. We met for lunch. The conversation awkward, halting, but real. He didn't offer a full apology immediately, but he acknowledged his presumption. He admitted he'd never truly seen me as a person with my own separate life. It was a beginning. The journey since has not been linear. There have been steps backward, moments of old patterns reasserting themselves. But the difference is seismic. I now have a voice, and he is learning to hear it. I learned that teaching your child respect is a lifelong project. And sometimes the most vital lesson comes not when they are small, but when you are both grown, and you finally say enough. That Thursday afternoon was not the end of my relationship with my son. It was the painful, necessary birth of a new one built, not on obligation and silent sacrifice, but on honesty, mutual respect, and the understanding that love, real love, cannot exist without boundaries. Now, when I sit in my armchair with my morning coffee, the silence is no longer something to fill. It is something I own. It is my peace earned through the difficult, necessary act of choosing myself. My house is my house. My life is my life. And I, at 60 a.m., finally, the undisputed owner of both. You see, for most of my life, I believed love meant erasing myself to make space for others. I now understand that love also means drawing a line around the self that remains and discovering that within that boundary, there is infinite room for a truer, healthier love to grow. Setting boundaries doesn't destroy connection. It makes authentic connection possible. That is the peace I found in the wreckage of that Thursday. And it is a peace I wish for everyone who has ever felt like a guest in their own life. For more life stories like this, check out the other videos on my channel and subscribe. On the screen, you'll find 2 new stories I'm sure you'll enjoy. Click one and start listening right away. Love